Today, we are rolling up characters for Dolmenwood and prepping them to explore the great unknown. How's it going? No Fun Allowed here, and today we're going to be going through the short, quick, and awesome process of rolling up characters for Dolmenwood, and then in the next video we'll be taking those adventures that we rolled today and going off and showing all the adventure know-how and action therein. So as you can see behind me, there's a measly 13-step program on creating these characters, but it's going to go by pretty quickly. If you've played any OSR systems, you know exactly what's going on here. If you haven't, well, surprise, surprise, you're about to see how easy, fun, and glorious it is. So first things first, all you need is a character sheet, which this uses a standard OSR template, but of course, you can just use the link for the free PDF therein of these character sheets, and that character sheet is just oozing with all sorts of flavor and awesomeness. So let's get down to it. Step number 1, roll ability scores. Roll 3d6 for each of your character's ability scores in turn: strength, intelligence, wisdom, dexterity, constitution, and charisma. And with the optional rule of if I roll bad stats, then I have the choice of re-rolling it. But here on No Fun, we like to play where it lands, so we're going to be rolling up these characters right now. Hopefully we get some good stuff. To aid me in this, I'm going to be using Roll20 because Roll20 lets you roll lots of different dice very quickly, and that's that. So let's get down to it. Our first roll is 11, 15, 9, 13, 4, and 10. What a stat line. Character number 2, 7, 15, 8, 11, 9, and 12. Oh boy. And my third character here is going to be 12, 18, 11, 11. 11 and 9. Okay, we got some studs and we got some duds here. So yeah, sorting through these, we got some fun stats all around. These characters are going to be a heck of a fun thing to drive through. Now moving on to number 2 of character creation, choose a kindred. Select one of the kindreds found therein. So let's dive into what makes those excellent and pick ones that are awesome for that. So I got some fun options here. We got the Braggle, which is the goat people. We've got elf. We've got Grimalkin, the cat folk. We got humans, mossling, woodgrew. So a bunch of different entertaining ideas around here. I'm ultimately going to pick a human, a Grimalkin, and an elf. And let me go ahead and figure out which ones I'm going to be assigning to. So I'm keeping it simple here. The elf the first character, the Grimalkin the second, and the human the third. Number 3 for character creation, choose a class. Select one of the following classes. And, it recommends fighter for newbies because fighter is pretty simple. But let's take a look at some of the classes and see what I'm kind of aiming for here. So we got our classic standard. We got the bard, the cleric, the enchanter, which is the not new one. That one is definitely taking a new spin on magic, so I'll probably pick one of those. Maybe assign that to the elf. We got fighter. I really like the fighter. We got friar. We've got hunter, knight, magician, thief. So I think what's going to end up happening is I'm probably going to make the elf the enchanter, the Grimalkin the Grimalkin's going to be a bard, and then the human is probably going to be the fighter or a knight. Ultimately going with fighter for the human, but for the elf, the enchanter, and for the Grimalkin, the bard. Now moving on to number 4, adjust ability scores. If you wish, you may raise a character's prime abilities by lowering other non-prime ability scores. For every 2 points of which an ability score is lowered, 1 point may be added to a prime ability. No ability score may be lowered below 9, and no prime ability score may be raised above 13 by this adjustment. So basically this is a way for if you're really looking to get a stat up to 13, which gives you that +1, which we'll get into a little bit later. That's a great way to do it. I noticed, for example, our fighter here has an 18 intelligence, so it might be worthwhile to drop that down some to get our strength up to 13. And so as we can see on the fighter character class here, we have their prime ability is strength, meaning that I'm allowed to do this. So yeah, let's dive into that, shall we? Let's lower our intelligence down to 16. Bring our 12 strength up to 13. Great stuff. Now on to number 5, note ability modifiers. Now that your character's ability scores have been determined, make a note of any associated bonuses or penalties. So if you're new to the OSR, or even if you have been in the OSR, this one is a tiny bit different than all the other stats. So as we can see here, here's how ability modifiers work. If you have a score of a 9 through 12, you get a +0 to your modifier. However, as you can see, the higher up you go, you get a +1, then a +2, and then at 18 you get that coveted +3. But of course, conversely, it's 6 through 8, you get a -1, 4 to 5, -2, and at 3, you get a -3. Those are pretty significant. We'll be seeing here that they add not only to your attack rolls and your checks and all that various things, but also adds to your XP modifier. Each class has one or more prime ability scores, and if you have a high stat in that regard, then you'll get an XP bonus. But if you have an XP negative, then unfortunately your XP gainage is a little bit down. So to quickly just go over what the stats mean, strength adds to both your attack rolls and damage rolls, as well as breaking down doors, jumping, swimming in armor, etc., etc. Intelligence affects how many languages you speak, your literacy and intelligence checks. Wisdom affects your magical resistance and campfire cooking. Dexterity adds to your AC no matter what you're wearing, as well as your missile attacks and dexterity checks. Constitution, of course, ups your HP, as well as makes it easier to get a good night's sleep. And Charisma affects how many retainers you can have, their loyalty that you have, and your Charisma checks therein. Alrighty, having reflected all my scores here, we can see that our first character, the Elf Enchanter, has a +1 here, +1 there, but then a -2 in Con. Really, really bad, but hey, just don't get hit. Our Grimalkin Bard here has a minus of strength, but hey, is really smart. And our Human Fighter has a +2 to strength, a +2 to intelligence, and then just no negatives across the board. Pretty good. Now, number 6, probably the biggest step in this whole debacle here, is note Kindred and class traits. So this is going to be affecting your attacks, your save targets. This is going to be your skill targets, your languages that you know. It's going to be the majority bulk of everything that you've earned from choosing your both Kindred and your class. Alrighty, so we added the class and kindred things of our character sheets here. So for this Elven Enchanter, we get glamours, immortality, magical resistance, etc., etc. That's just for the kindred, and then on the right side, I've got all their class stuff. So we can see here that it's all working all well and good. However, funny enough, on the Grimalkin here, they also get a +2 magical resistance, but because the Grimalkin has a -1 wisdom score, that means that their magic resistance goes down to only a +1. So sad. And then lastly here for the fighter, fighters don't get anything at all whatsoever until they reach 2nd level, so they're pretty air quote boring in that regard, but they're nice and simple. But before we move on to the next step, there are 2 things we need to do here. So for both the Grimalkin and the Elf, they both start off with a glamour each, but then the Elfin Enchanter in particular starts off with some magic as well. So once again, both the Elf and the Grimalkin start off with their own unique glamour, but then also the Elven Enchanter starts off with another glamour as well as a fairy rune. So I'm going to be rolling up those now. So let's start off with our Grimalkin here. There are 20 glamours in total, so let me roll them bones. We get a 13 for the Grimalkin, and then might as well just start rolling for the Elf. The Elf is going to start off with a 2. So our Elf starts with the glamour of Beguilement, and the Grimalkin starts off with the glamour of Mirth and Malice. Great stuff. So let's just quickly check those out. Beguilement here, duration 1d4 rounds, range 30 feet. The caster's words have great power over mortal minds. A single mortal addressed by the caster must save versus spell or believe the caster's words for a brief period. Great stuff. Meanwhile, the Grimalkin has Mirth and Malice, is that his duration 1 turn, range 30 feet. When speaking to a group of mortals, the caster can impart a subtle sense of shared cheer or creeping discord. Cool stuff. And now moving on to the Elf Enchanter in particular here. At level 1, an Enchanter knows 1 randomly selected rune of lesser magnitude, and then further on they can potentially learn more. And then also throughout their career track, they just ultimately earn more glamours. So at level 1, they start off with another glamour. So as we can see here, once again, I'm going to be rolling another d20 to see what glamour they get, but also I'm going to be rolling a d6 to see what type of lesser rune they get. And we'll be diving into all that stuff in a moment. Let's see, that is for the glamour, and this is for the rune, a 1. Okay. So our Elf gets a 2nd glamour in the form of Masquerade, and their lesser rune is Deathly Blossom. So runes are one of the more fascinating, magical, and whimsical types of magic in this system. So as you can see here, when you use a rune, if you are of a lower level and is a lesser rune, which ours is, we can only use it once per day. But as we level up, we can actually use that more, and then once we get the better and better runes, potentially over time, we can cast those even more and more. However, something to note is, rune granting isn't a guaranteed. As you can see here, runes aren't always granted, but you've got the chance to learn more, so it is what it is. So our Elf Enchanter is given Deathly Blossom, duration 1 turn or until used, appears in caster's hand. An exquisite white rose is conjured in the caster's hand. Proffering the Rose, one who smells the rose must save versus doom or fall into a deep faint, appearing dead for 1d6 turns. That's excellent stuff right there. I just love the fantastical magic in this system, let me tell you. Now moving on to step number 7, rolling hit points. So this is the grand all be all. This is the scariest thing ever because HP is scarce in this game, but you got to work with what you got. So thankfully there's a little summary here. We can see that bards have a d6 of HP, the enchanter has a d6 of HP, and the fighter has a d8 of HP. Funny, I typically go for low HP classes, but not this time, I suppose. So in order, this is going to be our Enchanter first, gets 5, our Bard gets 3, and our sweet, sweet Summer Child Fighter gets a 8. Wow, lots of good HP there. But as a reminder here, that HP high roll was necessary on this Elf Enchanter because they have a -2 to their con, so 5 HP going down to 3. Not the greatest, but hey, it's still something. But optionally here, re-rolling 1s and 2s, if you roll for hit points comes up to 1 or 2 before applying the con mod, the referee may allow to re-roll HP, which I always recommend. I think if you start off as a cool epic fighter with 1 HP, you're not really that cool or epic, and it just feels bad to have less HP than all the squishy loser casters, right? Now on to number 8, roll for equipment. Optional rule, however, is buying equipment. So if you like giving your players the options, they simply just roll 3d6 times 10 gold and buy whatever you want. But I'm going to be rolling for their equipment here because rolling is more entertaining, and we'll see what we come up with. They get general items, they get class items, they get adventuring items here, and they also get a trinket tied to their kindred. So before we move on to looking at the kindreds and then the class items you get, let's just immediately take a look at these adventuring items here. There's a nice little d20 table of stuff. Each one gets 4 of them, so I'm going to be rolling 4d20 for each of them. The first roll is going to be our Enchanter. Our second roll is going to be our Bard, and our third roll is going to be our Fighter. Okay, we get a nice, healthy variety of stuff. So we get firewood and lanterns and sacks and tents, a whole bunch of good stuff. Now, as a reminder, each of the kindreds each have this D100 table, which, in all honesty, is a D50 table, but hey, we'll let it slide. They each have their own separate thing here, which is informative of the character and of the world. So let's roll for each of them, shall we? First, the elf. Next, the Grimalkin, and next, the human. So our elf starts off with a spyglass that always shows a view of sea at night. That's pretty entertaining. Oh, this is actually really, really fitting, I think, for the Grimalkin. They have a whistle that only dogs can't hear, which I find that really, really entertaining with a cat-type character. I dig it. And the human starts off with a head-sized glass sphere with a neck opening. Interesting. And now moving on to the class items. As we can see here at the start of every one of these classes, there's always a starting equipment roll of weapons and armor and class items themselves. So our Bard starts off automatically with a musical instrument, stringed or wind. I'm going to go stringed. I always like the string instruments more. But then we roll a d6 for the armor and a d6 for the weapons. But we actually get to roll twice for the weapons, so we'll see. So for the armor, we get a 1, so the worst of them all, but then we also get a 2 and a 1 for our weapons. So our Bard is starting off with no armor. Hey, our Grimalkin doesn't want to be tethered down by that worthless armor, right? But then our Grimalkin starts off with a club and 3 daggers. Very telling of our character, I guess. Our Enchanter is going to do 1 roll for their armor and then 2 rolls for the weapon as well. Let's see it. We get a semi-decent and then all over the place. Let's see it. Would you look at that? Our Enchanter starting off with leather armor, and their weapons are a club and a short bow with 20 arrows. Okay. And lastly here, the Fighter. This is the one that you really want to roll high on from the get-go, because starting off with plate mail and or shields and all that will be really, really good. 1d6 for the armor. Yikes! And then for the weapons. Okay. So starting off our Fighter with leather armor, a dagger, and a short sword. You know, maybe there's a reason why these people are adventuring. They're probably really poor. Now on to number 9, note Armour Class. Your character's AC is determined by their armor, as well as dexterity bonus, and also there is some unique little fringe cases where your AC can go up. If you're unarmored, then your AC equals 10 plus your dex mod. Pretty simple. So unfortunately, I only rolled leather for my people, and in fact I rolled unarmored for one of them. But we can see here that the armor costs as much as it does, as well as its AC bonus, its weight, and also its bulk. The bulk is going to be an important one because that's a surprise tool we're going to be using for later to determine our movement. So as you can see between the board here, we've got the elf, who normally is wearing leather armor, so that's the 12, but then he gets the +1 for the dex. We've got the Grimalkin, which has a 10. However, on the fringe case, if they go up against a large creature, then they actually get a +2 to their AC due to their size. And then we've got the human, which is just a measly 2, or 12, I should say. Number 10, note speed. Determine the character's speed based on the amount of equipment they are carrying. And then the unencumbered speed is 40 in normal mode, 120 exploration per turn, and 8 travel points per day. So we're going to be looking at that just a second. So one thing I really like about this product is it comes with various ways on how we can handle encumbrance, because it is important that you track the gear that you have, because it adds verisimilitude to the world. It makes the choices of what you bring, what you carry, what you wear, and how much loot you can grab out of the dungeon. It makes all of those important. So we have a basic weight encumbrance, we've got the carrying capacity, we've got the slot encumbrance. I really like the slot encumbrance in particular. So there's a lot of various ways we can look at that. For the demonstration here, I'm going to be using the slot encumbrance because I really like that one. So for that one, it's incredibly simple. We can see here that your occupied slots infer how much your speed is. So you can equip up to 3 items and stow up to 10 items, and then you've got that speed of 40. But if you bring even more stuff, more importantly, it's typically when you're hauling back all the treasure and loot, that's when you start to slow down a bit. Your equipment speed goes 4 to 5, and stowed 11 to 12 brings it down to 30, etc., etc. And then, of course, there's just some nice simple ideas on what is an encumbrance here. So general item will be 1, clothing isn't going to be much, but then something bulky like a barrel, casket, or that's going to be 2 slots, etc., etc. I really like that. And after just checking, I saw that everyone is on the up and up. We're going to be covering this in the next episode when we take these characters out on an adventure. But when it comes to that movement speed, you are as fast as your slowest person because, let's face it, if you've got 3 people that are really quick and then 1 person that's really slow, are you going to leave them behind? Maybe. But you're obviously as quick as the travel pace allows you to be. Now on to number 11, choose alignment. Decide whether your character is lawful, neutral, or chaotic. So let's take a look at what those mean exactly. So I know, depending on where you're coming from in regards to alignment, sometimes it's seen as good, sometimes it's seen as bad. Usually I see a lot of people refer to it as being a bad thing, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the case. Like a per example right here being lawful. Lawful beings are trustworthy, believe in protecting others, and act for the good of the group. They obey the rules of society and strive for fairness and justice. You can rule that, or you can take it on the philosophical side here. On a philosophical level, law represents the belief in goodness, order, truth, and justice as the natural order of the universe. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be upright and standing every single moment, every single minute. You don't have to play it that way. And then conversely, on the chaotic side, on the philosophical level, chaos represents a belief in the meaninglessness and randomness of the universe, wherein the individual's selfish desires are upmost. This principle can usually be equated with evil, but it doesn't necessarily have to be evil because, you can be selfish but then end up working for the good side. It's just a matter of how you want to go about that. Something I really like here is it does tell you that you really shouldn't tell your alignment to the other players. That should be discovered over the course of the campaign and potentially through the use of magic or various other means. And for these characters, I'm just simply having the Human Fighter be neutral, the Grimalkin Bard be chaotic, and the Elf Enchanter being lawful. Number 12, note, level, and XP. Your character begins play at level 1 with 0 XP. I genuinely don't understand why this was added, but, I actually don't understand why that was added. You typically start most games at level 1 with 0 XP, but, maybe in the game you want to have a catch-up mechanic where as you guys are adventuring, some people die, but you don't want to start them off at level 1 with 0 XP. Maybe you want to start them off at higher XP thresholds to get them back into the game quicker. But on that note, it's a good thing to look here. As a reminder, this is not a modern system where everyone levels up the exact same rate. Everyone does level up just a little bit differently, but that's reflected in the class's design. It's reflected in the world. So we can see here that the Bard, their first level up is at 1,750 XP. which is the same as the Enchanter. The Enchanter also has 1,750 XP. But, compare that to the Fighter here, the Fighter levels up to level 2 at 2,000 XP. And as a reminder, we should be putting that XP bonus for everything that is entitled therein. So for our Human Fighter, we can see here that they have a prime ability score of Strength, and they are human, meaning that they get that plus 10. So for our Fighter, for example, because they have a 13 in Strength and they are a human, they get a plus 15% to all XP earned. Our Bard here, unfortunately, has 0 because their stats do not intertwine. However, the fringe case here is our Elf Enchanter. So our Elf Enchanter has the following here. Their prime abilities are Charisma and Intelligence. So when you look at our Charisma and Intelligence and on our Elven Enchanter here, we have a 15 Intelligence, so that should give us that percentage increase. However, their Charisma is only 10. And as we can see here in the prime abilities area, multiple prime abilities, for classes with multiple prime abilities, the lowest score determines the character's XP modifier. For example, a Bard with an 8 Dexterity and 15 Charisma would suffer a minus 10 penalty to XP. Meaning that our poor Elf Enchanter gets a plus and nothing to their XP bonus. And last but certainly not least, finally step number 13, name and details. Name your character and fill up all those juicy details. Let's take a look. So for all these characters, we're missing our name, a background, affiliation, and Moonsign. So every single one of the Kindreds has a rollable table for names, so I'm going to be doing that now. And I mean, come on, these elf names are already fantastic. I'm going to say that our elf is a courtly elf because they are intelligent, I guess. So let's go and roll for that. Wow, creepy. We got Murder of Ravens. What a swell elf name. And after rolling for the others, we got a Prissy Snuffle. What a great name. And Hank Loomer. Oh, goodness. So all of the backgrounds are actually unique to the Kindreds. So we can see here that an elf has a D20 list of a whole bunch of various things. You could be a unicorn handler or a courtier or nut forager. A Grimalkin, for example, they can also be an alchemist aide or a vole farmer, etc., etc. But then we scroll all the way down here to human, and human's got a wide variety of things. So for that, I'm going to be rolling 2d20 plus 1d100, working from left to right. We've got an 11, an 18, and a 37. So a 37 for our human gives us a dock hand. Excellent. An 18 for our Grimalkin gives us a trapper slash furrier. Okay, I can work with that. And an 11 for our elf enchanter gives us librarian. I think that's incredibly fitting. So we got two more things left on these character sheets here, the affiliation and the Moonsign. So when it comes to the affiliation, there is no written anything to roll on to associate your character with anything. That's something that you should work up with your referee in regards of making these characters, in regards of who are they affiliated with, where are they going, what faction do they belong to. Maybe they don't have any affiliations and that affiliation is something that's going to grow over time. That can work a number of different ways. But lastly there is the Moonsign. So what's very interesting is the Moonsign is an optional rule, but there's no way I would ever not rule this because it's so cool. You essentially roll for your character's birthday. And in doing so, rolling that D100, that gives you a cool little bonus effect. You know, it may not ever really come up all too often, but the fact that it's there just feels oh so cool. So for each of these characters, I'm going to be rolling their D100s to see what they were born under, the moon, and the effect they're in. Alrighty, working from left to right, we've got an 83, a 99, and a 65. So our dear elf enchanter was born under the goat waning moon. That gives them a +1 bonus to attacks against Braggles, including Crookhorns. Cool stuff. Our Grimalkin bard was born under the sign of a black waning moon, which gives them a +2 bonus to saving throws versus illusions and glamours. Pretty dope. And our human fighter was born under the witch waning. We got a bunch of waning for some reason. This whole group is waning moons. Excellent here. But the witch's waning moon gives you a +1 bonus to attack rolls against witches and holy spellcasters. Really cool. And just like that, we have rolled up 3 characters for our Dolmenwood campaign adventure. This is going to be a fun time. I really dig these characters. I dig the vibe. I dig the setting. And these characters just come to life with their tiny little aspects they're in. I'm absolutely digging this, and I can't wait to show them off on their adventure. You know, I'm going to throw them in peril to show you guys the kind of peril that can be happening here in the Dolmenwood. But, you know, we'll see if they come out the other side, or if we have to roll up new characters for the time thereafter. So as we can see, character creation in Dolmenwood is nice, simple, straight to the point, but still oozing with bunches of flavor, and we're going to be seeing that flavor spring to life in the adventure hereafter, where we go over exploring the great unknown, using those travel points, sleeping at night, and a little bit of dungeon delving. Will these characters survive? Who knows, but only time will tell. So tell me, are you looking forward to creating some characters for Dolmenwood? What are your ideas? What are your concepts? What are you looking for exactly? I want to hear it. I want to see it, because I love this stuff. But that's going to do it for me. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you to my wonderful patrons. You guys are absolutely incredible. And I cannot wait to see you all in the next one.